because usually I haven't done this before, but I did it for you at the beginning of the lesson. Halacha is Jewish law, found in the Torah, very brief, required explanation, found in the Talmud, and the Talmud contains the Mishnah and the Gemara. Right. Now, there are new medical situations which require new rules and regulations. You can't just stay in the past, the distant past. Things are changing all the time. I mean, this is not bioethics, but comes electricity. So the rabbis had to make a decision about electricity. And they made a rule that you may, of course, use electricity. You just mustn't set it in motion on the Sabbath, or on the Jewish New Year, or on the Day of Atonement. So what happened? Jews also embraced technology. So what do a lot of people use? They use timers. They use time switches. So lights go on at a certain time and they switch off at a certain time. They haven't touched them. Ultra-Orthodox will not use time switches because they say that's cheating. But anyway, I said to you, Jews will always have different opinions. Now, we come to IVF. And I always choose IVF. Do you do that?
We do abortion and euthanasia mainly.
Okay, so I'll just do this just in case. So IVF, in vitro fertilization, for couples who can't have children naturally. So comes IVF 30 years ago. The first IVF babies are now 30. The rabbis had to make a decision. If people cannot have children naturally, are they able to use IVF? So they go to Torah and Talmud, and they go to the very first law in the Torah, and that is, be fruitful and multiply. And they say the couple should have a child. Now it's actually quite interesting because initially the rabbis declared that if they couldn't conceive naturally, they could each donate an egg and a sperm, and it could be worked out by science in a laboratory. And the rabbis declared that if there was a donor egg or a donor sperm, that could be adultery. Anyhow, later on, more broad-minded rabbis decided that's rubbish, that's old wives' tales. Obviously, the couple cannot conceive naturally, and so there are now clinics for Orthodox people where there are donors of both eggs and sperm. They're obviously people who are interviewed and okayed, and they are allowed to have children that way. Now we come to, so you don't do those, so we'll go to the next one. Okay, so there are 4 golden rules in Judaism. The first one is do not kill, and that comes from the 10 Commandments. The second is that all life has a value. All people are created equal. Nobody can decide that one person is more worthwhile than another, or one who is less worthwhile. One's life belongs to God. In other words, God makes that decision if you're going to die or if somebody's going to be born. And then the last thing is that it is one's duty to save life and heal the sick. So that means that euthanasia is totally unacceptable. You're supposed to save the life, not take it away. And it is the duty of the family and the doctors to heal the sick. Now, we are told by the prophet Micah that what is good, what does God require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. In other words, you have got to obey God's law. So for people to lead a good and correct life, an ethical life requires justice, charity, humility, and abiding by God's law. Now these laws come from Tanakh, or Torah actually. They are the word of God and they are not negotiable. So there are strict laws surrounding abortion and euthanasia. So we come to 3 bioethical principles. Human life, we've said, has infinite value. Then we come to one that is difficult. Now, I have to tell you that since I retired, I've become a volunteer at a Jewish old age home. Now, I always vowed I would never work with old people. And I vowed that until I got old, okay? And it is a very rewarding experience. And you look at these aging, ill people, and you realize that you can help ease them into their dying days. And they are dying there, a lot of them. And you learn to accept that it is part of life. So, you don't want to extend a person's life if they are suffering terribly. However, you may not carry out euthanasia. So it's a fine line. The thing that you can do to help those people is you can improve their lives in certain ways, and you have to be committed to do that. So we are required, Jewish adherents are required to act responsibly and preserve the well-being of their own bodies. In other words, we shouldn't damage ourselves. In Judaism, tattoos are not allowed. And for a very long time, people who had tattoos were not allowed to be buried in the Jewish cemetery. Well, now there's a bit of a problem, isn't there? And you can't do that. It's not Torah law, because the rabbis who made that decision. But tattooing is a desecration of one's body. So if you're a religious person, you won't do that. Why am I telling you that? I've got no ideas. Because your bodies belong to God. Now, instead of taking life, you're supposed to save human life. And you can override any law in Judaism to save life, including breaking the Shabbat. You must save human life. You can't commit murder to do that. You can't commit incest to do that, and you cannot worship idols to do that. But every other law is overridden. Now, we come to this withholding treatment, committing suicide, having an abortion, etc. How does Judaism cope with that? Sorry, did the wrong thing.
No, it's not there.
No, I wanted to see something here. Sorry. I'm so bad with the computer. Okay. Now, Judaism actually allows abortion, doesn't approve of it, and would prefer it not to happen. And abortion as a contraceptive is totally prohibited. You cannot say, I made a mistake, I don't want the child. There are 25 conditions under which a rabbi will grant you an abortion, the right to have an abortion. One, of course, is rape. If the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest. If the mother's mental health is at risk. If the child will be born into a situation where that child is not wanted. But there's also a very big thing in the Jewish community. The vast majority of Jews in Australia come from a West European background. My family came from Lithuania. Now, Jews were kept in ghettos and in little towns, villages, Jewish villages called shtetls. They were not allowed out of those living areas. They had to get permission to go to another area. So if a young man wanted to get married and he wanted to go to another village or another ghetto to find a wife, if the authorities didn't give him permission, he had to find a wife in his own community. And that led to the marrying of cousins. Yeah, it's allowed even in Australia. It's not illegal, and it's not illegal in Jewish law. Now what happened was that the Jewish gene pool became very poor. And there is a Jewish disease called Tay-Sachs, Tay-Sachs. And if both spouses, the father and the mother, both have the gene, then the child 100% will get Tay-Sachs. Now, it is a terrible, terrible disease, and no child can live beyond 2. And in those 2 years, that child will suffer terribly. If one partner has Tay-Sachs, then the child born to them has 50% chance of getting Tay-Sachs. Now, there's a whole bunch of diseases like this, and it's because of that very, very small gene pool. So all year 11s in Jewish day schools, where there's a large Western European Jewish community, are tested. They genetically tested for Tay-Sachs and for a number of other genes. And so they only get the results of those tests at the end of year 12. And when they get married, they know that they can, whether or not they carry it, and then as a couple they can make a decision about having children. I mean, obviously today there's genetic engineering, but that's another decision that has to be made by the rabbis. Those people who aren't at a Jewish day school are advised by rabbis to be genetically tested before they get married, just so that they know where they stand as far as children are concerned before they get married. Okay. Now, we are commanded to preserve health and life, and suicide is a definite law that one should not commit suicide. When Noah came out of the ark, God made a covenant with Noah. A symbol of that covenant was the rainbow. And God gave Noah 7 laws. They called the 7 Noahide laws. And one of them was, thou shalt not kill. And included in that killing is not that only that you will not kill others, but that you will not kill yourself. And until, I suppose, about 40 years ago, any Jewish person who committed suicide was buried outside of the Jewish cemetery as well. Now it's not like that. You can be buried because the rabbis say that you were not in your right mind. The person who committed suicide was not in his right mind, and therefore somebody else made that decision. So then we come to abortion and euthanasia. So I'm just going to read to you the notes that I've got over here. So A, it's in the 10 Commandments. Your teachers will give you this. Secondly, from the book of Ecclesiastes that I spoke to you about at the beginning of the lesson, there's a time to live and a time to die. So Jewish belief is that God has a plan of when you will be born and when you will die. And Jews cannot change God's plan. So abortion, as I say to you, it's not really, it is accepted only under certain conditions, and as for death, that definitely cannot be changed. Now, in Judaism, the fetus is not considered as an independent being until birth. So it's only when the child is born that that child is a person. Now, there also used to be, it doesn't apply today, but if that child died before he or she was 30 days, the child was not buried in his or her own grave. It would be buried, he or she would be buried with the next burial that was coming up, because the belief was that until he or she was 30 days old, still was not a viable person. I mean, they don't go by that today. So it's interesting that we believe that the child is not a child yet in the fetus, it's only a proper person when he or she is born. So I said Judaism does not prohibit abortion, nor does it totally approve of it. When the mother's life is in danger, she may have an abortion, incest, rape, or in cases of terminal genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs. And if, as I say, the mother is a 15-year-old and she's not going to be able to look after the baby, and there's a case for the child not to be born. Some rabbis, not all, some will give that permission. Mother's mental health must be taken into account. Now, there's also another thing about Jews from Western Europe. Jewish women from Western Europe have a greater tendency to the BRCA gene. In other words, they are more susceptible to breast and ovarian cancer. And when it comes to genetic testing and genetic engineering, the rabbis are going to have to make a decision about genetic engineering to do something about that BRCA gene. I mean, when I was teaching at Mariah, every day there was another kid who came to school whose mother had either breast or ovarian cancer. It is a very, very common thing in Ashkenazi women from Western Europe. Now, we come to euthanasia. Now, this graphic that I've put on for you, I just wanted you to show that, Jews celebrate life. There are candles up there for the festivals and Sabbath. There's the Dove of Peace, there's Jerusalem. You've got to get the most out of the life that God gave you, so preserve it as much as possible. Now, IVF you don't do, so I just will change that. Okay, abortion. Now, abortion says, the verse behind it, do not kill, from Exodus, 10 Commandments, and just for you there, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, for everything there is a time, a season to be born and a time to die. And there's an encyclopedia of Jewish medical ethics, because there's a huge amount. I mean, the question arises, what happens if somebody has Siamese twins, conjoined twins, and one is going to die if the other one is saved? Which one do you save? I mean, the rabbis agonize over those decisions. Okay, so we come to euthanasia, and Judaism does not endorse it at all. I've seen some really, really suffering people in an old age home, and I think if it was me, boy, I would do something about it. And I mean, I don't know if I would, but I just think. Anyway, so Judaism does not endorse euthanasia. It is forbidden to engage in any act which hastens death, even if a person is already close to dying. If there is some artificial circumstance which is preventing death from taking place, like a life support system, it is permissible to remove it. Now, if we've got time, I'll tell you this story. I lived in Israel for a while, and parts of Israel are ultra Orthodox. And they have their own schools and synagogues and hospitals. And a doctor wrote his story. He worked at a religious hospital, he was a religious man. And a religious family brought their dying father into hospital. He had motor neurone disease, and they asked for him to be put on life support. They wanted to prolong his life as much as possible. So that is what the doctor did, because in Judaism, you preserve life. Anyway, after a while, the man started to become very uncomfortable and was obviously suffering and needed to go. So the family said to the doctor, please switch off the life support. He said, no, I can't do that. I'm not God. You asked me to save his life. I'm saving his life. I can't now take away his life. So the family took him to the High Court. And the High Court ruled that the doctor had to turn off the life support system. And if he didn't, he would be in contempt of court and he would have to go to prison. Now, he himself had a large family. He couldn't just allow himself to go to prison and leave his wife and however many children. So he switched off the life support. And for him it was the most terrible situation. And he wrote this article, and he said that if he was ever in that situation again, he would not switch it off. He would rather go to prison than actually end somebody's life, because the only being that can end life is God. So it's a very fraught situation, but today a doctor may take the person off life support. So according to the Talmud, a dying person should be treated like any other. In other words, you don't withhold food or water. If you feed somebody who's got flu, so you will feed somebody who is dying. And if you, now this is interesting with, assisted suicide, anyone who kills a dying person is considered a murderer. Well, it's in Australian law as well. Doctor-assisted suicide is prohibited. One cannot actively and knowingly administer a lethal dose of medication to put an end to their suffering. Passive euthanasia, when nature is allowed to take its course, is allowed when death is inevitable. I had a 94-year-old aunt who, she'd lost all her children, she'd had enough, and she refused to eat and drink. And the rabbi said, just leave her. And so that wasn't prohibited. She refused the food, she refused the drink, and nature took its course, and that was quite allowable. And another ruling, one does not have to provide medical treatment if it will only bring brief relief. You can withdraw treatment if it's requested, if it's not going to cure. So what's the point of giving somebody the medication over and over again if it's not going to help and the person says, I don't want it anymore? So if somebody is having chemotherapy, let's say, and I know a lot of people who are, unfortunately, and the treatment is bad and the cancer is not going, and they say, I don't want any more treatment, and they allow themselves to go more quickly, that is quite acceptable. And I told you about the life support system. No, don't want that. I just want to see if I've got anything else to tell you. One cannot actively and knowingly administer a lethal dose of medication. And now, if my aunt said she didn't want food and water, that's fine. But her granddaughter couldn't say, let's not give her food and water. That would be totally wrong. So she didn't have any children left, she only had grandchildren. She made the decision, that was fine, but her grandchildren were not allowed to make that decision for her. Okay. And then the next one is, you don't do stem cell research, but the two things that I've put there for you, you don't have to know the Hebrew words. Pikuach nefesh is saving a life. And to save life is what you do above all. It is a positive commandment, a law to save life. And I've put there the Jewish obligation to save life. And that is what the Israeli army does. It goes out to all disaster zones, helping save life. And I think that the last one, no, that's all. Yeah. Are there any questions? Does anybody want to ask anything about anything? No? Well, you've been very good, I must say. I know that you've sat for a long time. So I wish you luck, and remember 800 to 1,000 words only. Yeah?
3 quotes.
And the quote. Unpack the quote. Unpack it. So that the examiner knows that you know what it means.
Thank you, Pam, on behalf of Year 12. Has that helped you to consolidate your information? Right, Pam has street cred that we don't have because she's actually living the life. So I think we've got 8 minutes. I think they can have an early mark, don't you?